in pursuit of health and wisdom. Sapio with Buck Joffrey.
Welcome back to Sapio, everyone. Today I am here again with my friend, colleague, and my personal physician, Dr. Alan Viglione. And we're going to kind of pick up where we left off with these pillars of health. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about exercise. So, Dr. Viglione, welcome back.
Hey, I love this book. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, okay, so we were talking about last time, we talked about diet and nutrition. And again, the two things that when anybody goes to the doctor, those are the things that the doctor's going to tell, well, you gotta eat better. We talked about what that means in the last episode, and you got to exercise. And again, now these things have been so ambiguous. Again, I don't remember learning very much about exercise in medical school, and if you didn't learn it there, where are you going to learn it, right? The big concept I think that's important to remember, and I want to keep bringing it back up over and over, is that exercise falls under this umbrella of what we keep calling hormesis, right? It's challenging the body. It's making it so, the idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And again, exercise is that, right? So if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, if you're running away from a tiger, right, or whatever you're running away from that wants to eat you and kill you, it didn't kill you and it made you stronger.
Right.
But let's start with this very basic question, and it may seem sort of obvious, but why should anybody exercise? I mean, from a health perspective.
Gosh, yeah. Exercise is probably the best drug that exists for wellness. We talk about nutrition. So what does exercise do? Exercise uniquely hits longevity and health span. Some things we talk about only do one or the other, but patients that exercise not only live longer, we have documented that. Number two, they also live better. They're happier. So we can go through all the health benefits of exercise, but just to name a few, patients are better connected. There are hormones that get released in the brain.
Is that right?
That lead to happiness.
Is that just from going to the gym and hanging out with other people?
Yeah, maybe for you, Buck, but really, think about the runner's high. Think about the endorphins.
Okay, yeah.
These things flood the human body and lead to better connectedness, better sleep. So exercise can actually help optimize your sleep.
Which is another pillar.
Right, which is another pillar. So think about this. I mean, this is free by some means. This is something that anybody can do. Most people don't know exactly what to do, which is why we're talking about this. But this is free medicine. I just mentioned improved cognitive and brain health, but memory goes along the lines of that. Patients that exercise regularly are sharper. Exercise on top of all that leads to improved cardiac outcomes. We know that. I mean, that's pretty self-intuitive. More power output. Patients that exercise are more capable of handling the energy needs of their day-to-day life. And really, as we age, these things change. So, what better way to optimize your longevity than actually optimize the wellness that feeds into it?
Yeah. So, okay, so let's drill down on this a little bit. Again, it's so broad, exercise. So let's break it down. If you had some categories, and I know you want to probably break those into further categories and stuff. So why don't you start with some of that? Tell me the different types of exercise and
well, broadly speaking, cardio.
Okay.
Right. So when that term comes up, what do you think? What do you think about cardio?
Hard.
Yeah, cardio is hard. Or I should say, even more specifically, the cardiovascular system, which can actually implicate the brain as well, brain health, blood flow. So what that implies is exercises that can help optimize your heart, your vessels, and your brain. And that's a broad category. So we have distance runners. We have people that are running marathons, ultra marathons. We have people that are doing elliptical machines. We have patients that literally do yoga and hot yoga, and your heart rate's elevated. So there's a whole broad category of cardio.
So why do you think that is? I mean, I know it's a very basic question, but why would raising your heart rate and exercising in that way where you're raising your heart rate and all that, why
Yeah.
Why does that make a difference?
Yeah.
Like, why is that important?
I mean, it's such a fundamental question, right? So you use it or lose it, right? So come back to the hormesis theme here, right? So you're training your heart to exist under certain demands. So evolutionarily, if you're running away from the saber-toothed tiger, you have to be able to do that. And if you don't, you're going to get consumed and you might not pass on your genetic material.
Right.
Right? But that's why it matters. You exert yourself, you secrete hormones, enzymes, neurotropic factors, cytokines or whatnot to train yourself to withstand it.
Yeah.
And what does that do? It actually takes it one step further and it allows you to do it better.
So what's good? I mean, let's talk about. I want to make sure we have, for everything that we do, we have like some things that we can take away from it.
Yeah.
When you think about cardiovascular exercise, I can tell you what I do. Like so probably 2-3 days a week I'll hike. It would be fairly rigorous. Here in Montecito we have great hikes and they're very steep and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'll do that. I do kickboxing, for at least 1 or 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And then I do some other resistance training type stuff. But how do you define cardiovascular exercise?
Yeah, so you've probably been to the gym and you see level 1, level 2, level 3 on most cardio equipment. So what does that mean?
I don't
It basically
know.
means
I haven't really seen that. I just basically
don't
I don't
use
go to the
equipment.
gym very often, to be honest. But
Well, an easy distinguishing component to your question would be how high does your heart rate get in response to what you do?
Okay.
You can almost do anything. You can walk the dog, and I would classify that as exercise. But
Okay.
if it's level 1 or phase 1, that's literally just like walking down the street. If your heart rate doesn't go up and you're not putting a physiological stress on the body, you're not going to get the same output.
yeah.
So what we generally classify as appropriate exercise, or what really kind of defines exercise, is
Cardiovascular exercise.
2 and above. Yes, this is cardiovascular.
Okay. 2 and above. And how does somebody know if they're doing 2 and above?
It's very easy. You should be able to have a light conversation without feeling like you're going to throw up.
Okay.
So imagine this, Buck. We're going on a hike.
No, I get it. That's a hike, basically.
Yeah,
where you
it
can
is.
talk
You're
and
having
you're a little
conversation.
winded.
You're talking about life.
Yeah.
Your heart rate's up. And remember, if you're just looking at, if you're just trying to put patients in a box, one person's exertion is not the same as another. But if you think about it as simplistic as just that sentence, if you're Lance Armstrong, you have to walk a heck of a lot faster to get your heart rate up to have that sort of like barely conversational interaction.
Yeah.
If you're really poor shape, you might be able to just walk down the street very lightly and you'll have that. That person.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
For the second level of exercise, though, because, again, people, me included, I think for most people, whether you're are you really going to count calories? Are you really going to constantly be looking at your blood pressure and stuff?
Yeah.
Here, what you're saying is we're going uphill. You're slightly winded. You're like, hey, Alan, how's it going, man?
Yeah, I'll respond in a minute.
Right. So that kind of thing. That's when you're in that state. You go stage 2.
Yeah,
right?
stage 2, and that's what I would classify as the
Okay.
beginning of exercise.
Okay, so that's what the beginning of cardiovascular. So what's stage 3 then?
Well, it just has to do with what your level of exertion is. So, beyond that, kind of creeping towards your, I'm going to throw out a few words like lactate threshold, anaerobic threshold, to the point where it becomes so uncomfortable that you can't breathe out your acid to the same degree that you're taking and utilizing oxygen, then you start creeping stage 3, 4, and above.
Okay, so, I mean, how important? I mean, so where do we need to be then? I guess that's the question. I mean, is there any sort of research on being at level 3 or 4 is better than level 2, or how does that work?
It really has to do with what your output is, what your end goals are, right? So what are you training for?
Longevity.
Yeah, so good point. So this is how I would train for longevity. Stage 2 has profound effects on metabolic health, heart included. So what do I mean by that? When we generally classify exercise, what are our goals for exercise? We want to work out our heart, we want to work out our lungs, we want to optimize our brain.
You go look good in the beach.
We want to look good on the beach, we want to lose the belly fat, right? So all the above essentially are hit very well with stage 2.
Okay. You said hit, by the way, high intensity.
Where does that fit in?
Yeah, so is that is that stage 2?
No.
No, that's not stage 2. Okay.
No, by definition, we're talking 5.
Okay. All right. So let's keep
Yeah.
going. So who should do? So most people, pretty much everybody, should be doing stage 2 stuff.
Yeah, that should be the foundation.
That's the foundation.
Yeah.
What stage 3? Why should I do stage 3? And like, give me a good example there.
Yeah.
You know, like, because I want a picture for each one of these.
You want a picture for each category.
Yeah. So stage 2, I've got stage 1. I'm just walking down the street. Doesn't do shit. Stage 2, I am walking up that hill and I'm sort of winded, kind of excited, talking to a friend.
Yeah.
Stage
so
3.
Imagine stage 3. So you're doing stage 2, but you see a snake and you want to scurry up an extra 10, 15 feet.
That happens here.
I know
too,
it does.
It's funny. Yeah,
It does.
I remember my friend. I was up there, Romero Canyon with my friend Steve. Man, out of nowhere, this thing. I don't know. He must have almost stepped on it or something, and it chased him for like 20. It was a rattlesnake for like 20 or 30 yards. Anyway, so you're saying that when he was running for his life from that rattlesnake for 20 yards or so, that's level 3.
I would say at that point.
Is it level or stage?
So stage.
Stage. Okay, stage 3. Is that what that would be then?
Well, it depends how high his heart rate went.
Okay.
If he sped it up, scurried up, and tried to avoid that snake and had a slightly more discomfort to the point where harder to breathe, stack in carbon dioxide, that's stage 3.
Okay, stage 3.
Yeah. You know, there are other ways to quantify these by % of your maximum heart rate, but we're trying to stay away from...
Let's come back to that in a second, because some people are going to want that, because maybe you're on the elliptical or whatever and you can check. But let's continue. So what does stage 3 do for you? Who is stage 3 for?
Well, to be honest with you, most experts recommend the most of your time be spent on stage 2 with spurts into stage 5. So you bulldoze
so 3
through.
Is not really.
You bulldoze through 3, 4.
Okay. So what's stage 4?
Well, stage 4 is right at that point of your lactate threshold.
And what is lactate threshold?
So think about that physiologically, Buck. Really, I mean, what happens when you start to increase your oxygen demand?
Yeah. So you start metabolizing differently. Instead of turning oxygen into CO2, you don't get enough oxygen,
and then you're going to utilize anaerobic pathways of energy
which
production.
ends up creating lactate, lactic acid.
Yep.
So people have heard of that. And so so that's stage 4?
Yeah, stage 4 to stage 5.
Christ, what's after stage? What's stage 5? Like you're throwing up?
Yeah,
and
stage
stuff?
5 is classic HIIT training. So stage 5 is you're going spikes up to your peak heart rate.
Okay.
Yeah. So what is your peak heart rate? I mean, classically.
Yeah. What is peak heart rate? What's my peak heart rate?
Well, 220 minus your age. So you're a young
so
buck.
I'm 25.
Yeah.
No,
220.
220 minus your age. Okay, got it.
Yeah, that's a rough estimate. And I will tell you though that when I was doing my my metabolic VO2 max testing, which we'll talk about, my peak heart rate went 220, and 220 minus my age at that time didn't do the math. So everybody's different.
When was that? When was that?
It was about 10, 15 years ago.
Okay. Well, you're probably screwed now. I can
tell.
But so 220 was your max, and but typically do the equation again for people to know what their peak heart rate.
Yeah, 220 minus your age.
220 minus your age. Okay.
Yeah.
We went through zone 1 through 5. Is it zone or stage or what? Which one are you going to use? I heard it's zone, isn't it?
Zone is what some people use. I tend to use stage with patients.
Stage. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use zone because it sounds cool. So zone, we talked about zone 1 being basically you're kind of walking around. 2, I get it's easy to hike. 3 and 4, you said basically is mostly up to get up, sort of mostly just to get you up to 5, which is when you're, when you're kind of really maxed out, right?
Yeah.
Let's go back though and fill those in for people who are more numbers oriented.
From the ground up, zone 0 is rest. So that's your average heart rate at rest. Zone 1 is 50 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. So you got to know where your maximum heart rate is. You can estimate it. Some people have a pretty good idea of where it is. And then zone 2 is 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate.
Okay.
So we say you should put the bulk of your training in 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate.
Okay. And then zone 3
Yeah.
is what?
70 to 80.
70 to 80, and presuming like 80 to 90 for
Yep.
zone 4, and zone 5 is 90 to 100%.
You're hitting your max. You're redlining it.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
tell me the ideal
Yeah.
exercise, and this is ideal for cardiovascular health, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me what the ideal is, or if there's maybe there's not an ideal, maybe there's like different outcomes. So like,
Yeah.
how does that work?
Yeah, I see what your question is. The ideal is patient specific. The ideal is whatever you love to do that's in that range.
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
That's not giving me enough. Okay,
Yeah.
let's use me as an example.
So what do you love to do?
What do I love to do?
Yeah.
I love to eat. I don't. That's not
Does your
gonna
heart
do me
rate
any
go
good.
up when you eat?
No, well, depends what I eat, but you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, what do I like to do? So I'll tell you what I do. I mentioned hiking before, and then I like martial arts. Doing more of that. So those are the things I like. But I guess like from an outcome standpoint is the question I'm asking you. Is my goals are longevity and health span. I think that's primary number one. Okay. So if I primarily am focusing on longevity, lifespan, quality of life, tell me the specific workout that I want.
Well, you're looking for me to answer that for you.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
That's why you're here.
I'll give you multiple examples.
Okay.
You can be on a treadmill and walk on an incline.
Okay, but tell me more ambiguously, because we've already defined the zones, because we can fill in variables for the zones.
Yeah.
Right? But so
You want specific exercises.
I want specific. No. I want zones. What am I trying to do? Am I trying to do like 3 days of an hour of zone 2?
Oh, how much of it?
Like I'm trying to understand, because you've given me these zones. I got to know what the hell to do with the zones. Otherwise, you're just another guy telling me about zones.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're asking about duration within the zones, but more fundamentally, exercises that achieve the zones.
Okay.
Am I correct?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm not asking about specific exercise, because I feel like I get an idea where I'm at. Hiking is definitely a zone 2 thing for me.
Yeah.
And if I'm actually in a fight with martial arts, that's freaking level 5.
Yeah, that's
stuff.
not zone 2.
Right, that's level.
Yeah.
That's 5 stuff.
Correct.
So, but what do I need? What's that mix of 2 and 5 and all that stuff in terms of trying to get me that, get me to live to 220, so that when you say 220 minus my age, that my maximum heart rate is 0. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to do about 30 to 45 minutes in that stage about 4 times a week.
Of which stage?
Zone 2.
30 to 45 minutes.
So for you, that's hiking. For someone else,
How many
that
days
could
a week
be
did you say?
4 days a week.
4 days a week. Okay.
Yeah.
I do that already. And then what else?
And that's from a cardio fitness perspective. The other element of it is actually pushing your heart. So sustained heart rate elevation for 45 minutes. And the other element is pushing the red line. So there actually is good evidence that hitting zone 5, 1 to 2 days a week, has
For
profound.
how long?
Well, you're not going to do that 45 minutes. So the thinking is 4 to 6 minutes in zone 5. We're talking about a sprint.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Now, is that on different days than I do the 30 to 45 minutes of zone 2?
Yeah, I would, because you're really not going to get the same peak fitness.
Wait, and then that's all you're going to do that day?
Those are cardio. So you could do it different days. There's really no rule of thumb there. A lot of people actually split up their workouts.
So can I do the 4 days a week in zone 2, and then like 2 other days where the only cardio I do is the 4 to 6 minutes of like...
It's not 4 to 6 minutes total. It's 4 to 6 minutes in zone 5.
In zone 5.
And then this is what HIIT training is.
Okay.
So you're doing 4 to 6 minutes at a full out sprint, and then you let your heart rate come back to close to baseline, and then you burst it again.
And then you do it again.
And then you do it again. So do that 6 rounds.
Interesting. 4 to 6 minutes sounds like a long time to be in that phase. That probably takes some time, right?
Well, you know what we also do in medicine? You have to build up to that.
Yeah.
So you want to actually build up your cardio fitness, and then you start adding layering elements to zap your heart.
ideally for what I'm looking at, you told me that that I should probably be doing 30 to 45 minutes of VO2 max in zone 2, 4 days a week. Can you elaborate on the why in terms of, why that particular heart rate, why that length of time, that kind of thing? Because I think, it's nice, it's certainly nice to just have those basics, but it's also nice to understand why.
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. So the goal is to work out your mitochondria. You want to improve your oxidative processes.
What, Dr. Viglione, may I ask, are mitochondria?
Yeah, mitochondria are the little powerhouse organelles within a cell. So the mitochondria are largely responsible for producing ATP, our energy source for the body and the cell. Right? So the mitochondria are involved in several different things. The mitochondria are also kind of the sources of free radical production in the body. So you want efficient, healthy mitochondria. But also the mitochondria define how efficiently we utilize carbohydrates and fats. Right? So when you're in the gym, Buck, you're trying to work on your six-pack, right? You want to lose fat.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't have a six-pack. I drink a six-pack frequently, but that's why probably I don't have a six-pack. But go on.
Well, so the whole point of cardiovascular fitness from a metabolic standpoint is to be able to efficiently burn your macronutrients so you're not storing them in your body as fat cells, essentially, in your liver.
So how does zone 2, what is specific is so special about zone 2?
So the beautiful thing about zone 2 and that duration is that you actually hit that sweet spot. You optimize, you kind of cap out your metabolic efficiency gains without overdoing it and creating cellular damage.
So are you pushing your mitochondria to help me understand that in the context of mitochondria that you just mentioned?
Well, in fact, I'll pose that in kind of the state of hormesis. So you want to stress your body, but not overdo it.
Okay.
So
it's stressing the mitochondria, and therefore what happens? Is that creating more mitochondria? Is that creating or getting rid of the bad stuff?
You physically, literally get more mitochondria.
Okay.
There's a term called mitophagy, which is literally the autophagy process of
mitochondria.
Removing old, stagnant, inflammatory mitochondria. Right? So here it begets the longevity aspect of it. But you get more of them, you get newer, fresher ones that are actually more efficient. And that's the third thing, actually more efficiency.
So what you're saying is in zone 2 that happens with greater efficiency than even in a zone 3, 4, 5. Why would that be?
Well, and I think it has to do with when you start overdoing it, you get more cellular damage.
Okay.
And you get benefit.
So then you're like not just challenging, but you're actually freaking killing yourself,
well,
right?
Yeah, totally. I mean,
Right.
a lot of people, like personally, I love CrossFit, but some of the criticisms towards it is that you're kind of pushing more out of zone 2 into 5 constantly. Yeah. And then you get more cellular damage than you get benefit.
So with that same line of reasoning, would you say that there's such thing as too much exercise?
Yeah, I do. I mean, too much exercise essentially means insufficient recovery.
Yeah, and you're just breaking down.
You're breaking down. I mean, that's exactly it. There is a sweet spot to everything we do, optimization.
Okay, well let's switch over to this other category. We've spent a lot of time on cardio, which is probably the more what we know about, what we can control. But the other category presumably is weightlifting and weights. I think so. First of all, tell me this: what's sort of the ideal from the literature? What we know for the goal of the longevity and health span?
Yeah. So from a weights perspective, we're talking 3 or so days per week. You can do a little bit more, but less than that, you don't really get your optimized outcome.
3 days a week. Okay. Three or more.
So do the math
or
on
3
that.
days?
So some people do more, and
but isn't there a point though that you're breaking down too much and not allowing for recovery?
It has to do with how many muscle groups you're doing per day.
Oh, I see. But say you're doing the same muscle groups every day.
Terrible.
Every time.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Why is it terrible?
Well, because you're going to break down. Really, you're not going to have the nutrition to actually support metabolic growth.
Oh.
I mean, I can even tell you personally.
So you shouldn't do upper body and lower body on the same day?
All I do is biceps.
No wonder. No wonder. You're ripped. You're ripped. No.
Yeah, but seriously, anecdotally, and also, I mean, there's tremendous data behind this. If you overload the same muscle groups because you're trying to build the beach muscles or whatever, and you don't get proper recovery or nutrition to repair these muscles, you're going to actually lose muscle mass.
Yeah. Is that what happened on the Jersey Shore?
No, the pimples on their back and whatnot, that's called steroids.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So 3 days a week, but now you're saying, but on any given muscle group.
I would make it simpler for you. You got to hit every muscle group once a week.
Once a week, that's it?
Yeah, you don't have to do biceps twice a week.
Really?
So what a lot of people do is they do split regimens. So think about this. You'll do, this kind of gets into the nitty gritty of building an exercise regimen, but you do agonist and antagonist muscle groups together. So bench press with back,
Wow.
presses with triceps, right? So,
See, I've been doing it all wrong.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of ways to structure a workout regimen,
Yeah.
and there are some people too that really do believe that do upper body one day, lower body another day, rest, repeat it. The point is rest, but really at least once a week hitting the muscle groups. Don't withdraw any muscle groups from the workouts, otherwise you're going to have muscle imbalance.
Let me ask you this. We talked so much about the importance of cardio and weights. We have a very clear idea from what you talked about with regard to different levels of cardiovascular exercise and all these zones and what it feels like and what the percentages are. But what about weights? How do you even define weight training? Like when are you weight training and when are you just doing nothing?
Yeah, that's a really profound question, right? So the definition of weight training is overloading the joint, and your overload is different than my overload. And my
What is
weight training,
overload? What does that feel like?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know exactly what you mean. Do you mean like
Yeah.
you can't do it anymore?
Yeah,
Is
the
that
muscle
what that
failure.
means?
So now we're talking about,
Okay.
as opposed to aerobic training, anaerobic training.
Yeah.
So we're not using oxygen. We're actually using glycolysis and energy production from anaerobic capacities. So what does that mean? Overloading the joint, I use that term, and then to failure. So you know you've hit your target when your muscles can't lift another rep.
Okay.
Now apply that to all different muscle groups, and there's your answer.
Does it matter how much weight you use? Because you could do, I mean, like if you're doing like, I don't know, biceps or something like that, you can obviously do a lot more with 20 pounds than you can with 50 pounds and
I know. So you're talking about optimal reps, or reps are an analogy for exertion.
Yeah.
So there are some people that bench press and they do single rep max outs.
Just one?
They'll do one. They'll sit there for 3 minutes and they'll do, so those are power lifters. That's their goal.
Okay.
Is to lift something as heavy as possible, one rep.
Okay.
Now, other people will do 10 to 15 reps. And there is a bit of a misnomer about, well, what's the ideal muscle build-in situation? What they're doing is they're not overloading their muscles. Now, you can do that to failure and overload them. If you imagine this,
Is that
Buck.
the same?
Well,
Question being, 15 reps to failure, is that the same as 5 reps to failure in terms of outcome?
yeah, the answer to that is no. If you do 15 or 20 or more reps to failure, you're not going to get the same anabolic muscle build-in outcome. So what's our endpoint
So you
here?
shouldn't feel bad if you're only getting 3 reps,
So the ideal sweet spot is 3 to 8.
3 to 8.
Yep.
That's pretty big though. So 3 to 8.
Yeah.
And then how do you know when to move to the next weight, like a higher level weight?
Well, generally you start, the first thing, if you want to start with an exercise in the gym, say bench press, your first set should be to take your brain and cue it into your muscles, i.e. a warm-up. So it's to warm up your muscles, get blood flowing and facilitate balance. And then your second, third, fourth sets should be progressive overload. So generally, you don't do your first set with 3 reps and then do your second set with 6 or 8 reps, right? You do the opposites, progressive overload.
Progressive overload indeed.
And hormesis, you have to work it. If you're thinking about all these endpoints that we're discussing and you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, but you're bench pressing 85 pounds for 10 reps, you're not going to get your overload on the joint to see an outcome.
Yeah. And again, like, you know what, I think weightlifting is, in many ways, is like, and I'm not a big weights guy, you know, like I do it because I have to, but it really, like, you know, I prefer doing other stuff. But it's sort of a microcosm of what we're talking about with hormesis in general, because what you're literally doing is
Great
you're
example.
breaking down a certain percentage of muscle fibers, allowing them to come back bigger and stronger, right? I mean, that's the concept.
Yep.
Okay, well, we talked a little bit about mitochondria already, but specifically, there's this term, mitochondrial health. What does that mean?
Yeah. So how efficient your mitochondria are. Remember, you can utilize carbohydrates, you can utilize fats. So somebody that's metabolically insufficient, take a diabetic or pre-diabetic person, they're largely burn-in carbohydrates. What you really want is to metabolize and utilize fatty acids and fat for fuel. So mitochondrial health, really the answer to your question is, what energy source is it utilizing and how efficiently?
Yeah, got it. And again, the way we make them stronger is by ultimately a significant amount of zone 2 cardiovascular exercise.
Yep.
So in the context of longevity and aging, what happens to fitness and why? And is it inevitable?
Yeah, there is an inevitability here to some degree. It's impossible to have the same muscle mass and density in your 20s as compared to your 70s or 80s. We lose muscle density.
Right now.
Yes, correct. I mean, and the whole point of this is how do you identify it, so how you can fix it. But the same thing with cardio. Cardiovascular fitness diminishes with age. So it's important to be able to have metrics that we can utilize to monitor these things and trend these things. So let's take one at a time. So what are our metrics for cardiovascular fitness? You mentioned one of these terms, VO2 max.
Right.
So there's a way for us to physically test our metabolic efficiency and our cardiovascular health, VO2 max.
Okay.
So are you familiar with that term?
VO2 max?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, you told me what it was, right? Isn't that the same as peak cardiovascular output?
Yeah, VO2 max is a little bit more broad. I mean, so really what VO2 max refers to is at what point do you lose the ability to breathe out your carbon dioxide and hence your acid before you start building up lactic acid and essentially failing?
Okay, is that something that you can, like, how do you feel when that happens, or is that something that has to be you have to be hooked up to something?
Yeah, you have to be hooked up to something. You can be a treadmill or it can be a bicycle, but you have to be hooked up to a mask because you have to measure your oxygen and you have to measure your carbon dioxide.
And when you do that are you at a certain zone when you
start out with zone 1.
Okay, you do zone 1, and you go to zone 2. Oh, okay, and then.
Well, I'll tell you what the beautiful thing about it is. If you're measuring these gases, they're in a harmonious steady state. Your oxygen utilization and your carbon dioxide exhalation are in beautiful synchrony to the point where lactic acid is nice and low. You can look at this on a graph. Your zone, imagine this, zone 0, zone 1, zone 2, your lactic acid's down here, and your gases are perfectly synonymous. And then you start approaching zone 4 to zone 5. All of a sudden, you don't have enough oxygen to meet your needs.
Okay.
Carbon dioxide builds up, and that's
your VO2 max.
Builds up as an acid in your body, and you have to breathe it out. This is called ventilation, and you had a sharp spike. Lactic acid goes up, your ventilation rate goes up.
So at what point is that your VO2 max?
And your VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen extraction that you can do. So it's a very testable metric. It improves with training and it diminishes with age.
What types of exercise are best to improve that?
Yeah, so we spent all this time talking about zone 2, and really that's how you train. And then you do snippets of zone 5. So snippets of zone 5 where you really work your mitochondria, you work your heart, and you give it your all. And the combination of those two can heighten your VO2 max.
Why is VO2 max such a big deal? Like, why? I mean, why?
Well,
what do we know about VO2 max as it relates to outcomes of health?
Yeah, There is very clear data that patients with higher VO2 maxes live longer. It's a bold sentence. Higher VO2 max equates to longer lifespan, and health span. Patients with higher VO2 maxes are more capable later in life going on those hikes.
We talked about in the last episode, how do you get started, in the sense that, okay, I think Ben had asked the question. It's like, oh, well, if I want to do this, what should I do? Should I go to the doctor and and get labs then? And that's exactly what you would do in that situation. How do you get started in this? Because I think a recurring theme that we're going to have throughout is that you got to know where you're at and then keep measuring. And it's data and data. How do you get good data on your fitness? Cardiovascular or otherwise?
Well, you mentioned one, the VO2 max. That's our data metric. That's our cardio data metric.
Yeah, but do you just go to, cardio. Hey, your primary care doctor, hey, I need my VO2 max. It doesn't really happen, right?
Some primary care doctors, they can set you up. I mean, there are some local pulmonologists in town that have this set up.
Okay.
There are sports clinics. There are sports, the lab is one of them here in Santa Barbara that actually can test your VO2 max. We will. Now, that's how you do it. You have to engage the dialogue.
You got to find a place that'll test your VO2 max. Okay, now I have my VO2 max. What do I do with that? I mean, do I just, is that the only metric that I'm looking at? What else?
For cardiovascular fitness, the answer is yes. I would go to my doctor. Number one, get baseline labs so we can see exactly what your metabolic status is, if you're insulin resistant. So think about this. You train more in stage 2 to optimize your mitochondrial efficiency. So if you have insulin resistance and you think that your mitochondria, and you actually have physical evidence that your mitochondria are not healthy, you have to know where you're at to identify good training durations, safe training durations. I'll give you an example. Someone comes in and they're morbidly obese. They have insulin resistance. They have all these health problems. Before you're going to put them in a vigorous workout routine and just say, hey, 45 minutes in stage 2, and then I want you to stimulate your heart, you have to optimize your basic health measures. You want to, in a very safe capacity, stress your heart. I mean, we call that weekend warrior, when you just go out and just go balls to the wall before you engage in this exercise regimen. So this actually does involve a medical consultation, evaluation, and baseline assessment.
Yeah.
We said one thing just to kind of piggyback on data metrics. We have data metrics to identify cardiovascular fitness, but how do you identify data metrics for weightlifting? So for bodybuilding or generalized weightlifting, you can track these things too just as easily.
How?
Well, one of them is called an in-body. You can actually look at muscle density. So if our outcome measure is muscle mass, if our outcome measure with weightlifting is muscle mass, and you can even subfraction, you can look at body fat percentage, you can track all these things. You're gonna look for modifications and changes. And you can do this thing called an in-body, which looks at all your metrics as frequently as you want, but you should start to see changes.
I guess last question on this is ultimately what we're trying to do here, and we've addressed to a certain extent already with different kinds of exercise that are optimizing things, but what else can we do to optimize exercise?
Well, I think the best optimization here is the synergy of the two. We don't live in a silo. You're going to get better outcomes if you do weights and you do cardio. You're going to have better outcomes if you weave in balance onto these things and actually train for something, right? I mean, you can train for long hikes, and if that's your bread and butter, that's great. You can put a rucksack on and do hard workouts to train for that. But identify what your fitness goals are, and then you can devise a plan that actually works towards it. Right. If you weave in, so again, this is beautiful harmony. If you weave in cardiovascular fitness with anaerobic weight training fitness, with balance training, so you can mitigate some of the later in life problems like falls and hip fractures, and bring you back to your last podcast, nutrition, you're going to see positive outcomes on all categories that are independently greater than individual ones.
Good stuff. Hey, Ben, 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 the producer, this is the opportunity for you to speak for the audience. What kinds of questions do you have?
Okay, I do have some questions. So the first thing I'm wondering about is VO2 max. Like, what is the right number for
Yeah,
me?
good. So what you should be striving for is the higher percentile for your age. So VO2 max changes with age. You should find out what the average VO2 max is for your age and crush it. Yeah, there is an optimal VO2.
There's optimal.
for
There
your
is a
age.
optimal VO2, and it's based on like whatever, population assessment of populations and epidemiology and
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, how accurate those are, that could be debated. But
Right.
the average VO2 max for someone like me, like a 40-year-old, would be about 35 to 40. Now, the average VO2 max for a 70-year-old is about 30% less than that. So we're talking about a VO2 max of 30 or so. So 1/3.
I'm afraid to test.
We really should. But a bigger question is, and you can actually do this, you can identify the hobbies and passions that you love, hiking,
Yeah.
and you can say, do I have the VO2 max to achieve that goal? So when you're training for life, or you're actually looking for longevity or health span benefits to diet, exercise, nutrition, all the above, you want to make sure that you actually have the tools to do these later in life.
Yeah.
So VO2, just to kind of give you a ballpark, on a hike, the hikes that I'm sort of expecting that you're
the rigorous
referencing, like
ones,
a moderately rigorous one. I don't see you sort of
Pretty rigorous.
trailblazing,
Yeah.
but you need a VO2 max of about 30 to 35 or so to achieve that.
Yeah.
So most patients.
So
most
if I
people-
can do that, I'm probably in that. I have at least that.
Yeah, and you can do it without question now. But if your VO2 max is going down as we age and you're not fighting to keep it up, then there is a point where we don't do the things we love to do. And then that's what happens with aging.
So I have a friend who will go unnamed, but I tried to go on a hike with him the other day, and he was he could
was
not do it
sucking
for it.
wind.
And I felt so bad. I was afraid he was going to have a
Yeah.
heart attack, just like going up maybe 20 yards. He had to stop.
Yeah.
And what he
interesting.
couldn't get over was the fact that he walks every day with his dog, no problem, for miles,
Yeah.
So I guess that just kind of goes to show you the importance of this level 2.
Yeah,
right?
the question of his metabolic health,
Yeah,
his
yeah.
mitochondrial efficiency, it might not be as great as he thinks.
Yeah.
But there is also an element of, if you do the same thing over and over and over
Yeah,
again,
you
you
get
can get
better at
very
it.
good at it.
Ben, what else do you have?
Okay, so I have another one. Last time we talked a lot about food, and this time exercise. So now I'm wondering, okay, I'm going to start an exercise program or whatever. So how do I have to change what I eat now?
Yeah, great. I mean, so seriously, metabolic needs increase as we exercise more. And if there's somebody that is putting significant cardiovascular stress onto their body, they need more carbohydrates, they need more fuel. I mean, this is why we carb load before marathons. So there's a time and place for things. But for muscle building and recovery, proteins, lean proteins, and some people, I mean, really, I think these things are grossly underestimated, what the optimal protein intake is. But if you're looking to build muscle mass, you should have about 1 gram per pound of your body weight.
Which is insane. I mean, I'm like 215 pounds.
Yeah.
That is a lot of protein.
A lot of protein.
A lot of protein.
So if you're doing these exercises under the care of a physician, or you're getting routine tests done, we're monitoring things. One of the things I would monitor as well would be kidney function.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that's the counter to this that I would be very concerned about is, people taking all these protein drinks and stuff. And I've said for years that I anticipate this, in the next 20 years that the amount of kidney disease is going to go way up because of the amount of protein people are taking.
Yeah, your body just has to be able to handle the nitrogen balance.
Yeah. What else, Ben?
Probably the last one, but so if I'm just getting started, so now I'm going to start, I really want to monitor everything. So what,
Are you inspired, Ben?
I'm inspired. I'm ready to go.
I'm inspired.
But I don't want to, I'm a metrics guy, so I want to see the numbers. So what should I test right now before I get started so that I can see and be happy about the
Are you thinking about
progress?
getting
Max?
started from a weights perspective or cardio?
Just
or both?
just in general health.
Yeah. So general health, you got to just do basic blood work. And when I say basic, my basic is different than some doctors' basic. But you really want to see that your metabolic systems are working. You want to make sure that your heart is healthy enough to take on the load. And I mean, that's actually a profound sentence, right? So if, for instance, if I do basic blood work on you and I find out that your cardiovascular risk is through the roof, you got extreme, elevated cholesterol, high
He's a
apolipoprotein B,
with
diabetic.
his crazy lipids.
Yeah, seriously, I would say, hey, let's dial this in.
Yeah.
And
Maybe get a stress test and make
I
sure
would.
you're, yeah.
I would. I would do. I mean, and this is not sufficient to just look at imaging, for instance, a coronary calcium scan. I would actually see the functional health of your heart. You don't have to do any fancy lung testing, but I would make sure that the systems are working, and then I would go in very slow. So phase 1 of a workout routine, we didn't really talk about this, but would be nerve muscle innervation. You want to go very light, very slow to train your neurovascular system, the neuromuscular junctions, to train themselves. Otherwise, you're more prone to injury.
Sure. What's another one? Is it because that was number 1?
No, I mean, this is actually what a lot of personal trainers talk about.
Oh.
So if you're going to come up with a personal training regimen for a patient, you want to look at their muscle balance so you know how to work them.
Yeah.
But you also want to focus on the nerve muscle. And really, I talked about weight training, like progressive overload to work the joints. But when you have somebody that is completely naive to a workout regimen, phase 1 is to actually stimulate those connections. And we're talking about extremely light weights, push-ups, good form, really just make sure. And if you skip that phase, you just go right into overload, you're more prone to injury.
Last question, or is that it? Okay, fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Viglione, you have changed my view on exercise. I'm going to have to start from scratch here and figure out how to get myself into better shape. Thanks so much for
Thanks,
joining
bud.
us, and
Anytime.
we'll be back for the next surprise pillar next episode. Be right
Thanks,
back.
bud.